Hey guys, and welcome to the channel. We've all heard of stories of creatures that inhabit the shade of this world, visible to men only when they stray too far from the path and into lands unknown. We call them vampire, yeti, kraken, and phantom. All are unknown entities of the dark recesses of the human mind. They can be found everywhere in the world, including the American state of West Virginia. And perhaps the most famous creature of legend from there is none other than the Mothman, bringer of disaster and harbinger of death. On November 12, 1966, in Clendenin, West Virginia, a gravedigger working in a cemetery glanced up from his work and beheld something strange soar over his head. A large figure that moved rapidly across the cemetery, going from tree to tree. This was the first reported sighting of what would come to be known as the Mothman, an elusive creature that, although now widely celebrated by the town it once terrorized, remains as mysterious as it was on the night that a few frightened witnesses first laid eyes on it. Just 3 days after the grave digger's initial report, in nearby Point Pleasant, West Virginia, two couples noticed a gray-winged creature about 6 or 7 feet tall standing in front of the car they were all seated in. Eyewitnesses Roger Scarberry and Steve Mallet told the local paper, the Point Pleasant Register, that the beast had bright red eyes about 6 inches apart, a wingspan of 10 feet, and that it seemed to want to avoid the bright headlights of the car. According to the witnesses, the creature was able to fly at incredible speeds, perhaps as much as 100 miles per hour. Though all agreed it did make for a clumsy runner on the ground. They knew this because the creature allegedly chased their moving vehicle to the outskirts of town in the air, then scuttled into a nearby field and disappeared. Knowing how absurd this must have sounded to the local paper in a small Appalachian community in the 1960s, Scarberry insisted that the apparition couldn't have been a figment of his imagination. He assured the paper, "If I had seen it while by myself, I wouldn't have said anything. But there were 4 of us who saw it." The papers at this point were skeptical, calling it a bird and a mysterious creature. Though they did print Mallet's description, it was like a man with wings. But more and more sightings were reported in the Point Pleasant area over the next year as the legend of the Mothman took shape. The Gettysburg Times reported 8 additional sightings in the short span of 3 days, including 2 volunteer firefighters who supposedly saw what they described as a very large bird with large red eyes. One sighting, reported by Salem, West Virginia resident Newell Partridge, told of strange patterns that appeared on his television screen one evening, followed by a mysterious sound just outside his home. Shining a flashlight toward the direction of the noise, Partridge supposedly witnessed 2 red eyes resembling bicycle reflectors looking back at him. This remains a popular one in the Mothman mythos, especially because it resulted in the disappearance of Partridge's dogs. Dr. Robert Smith, associate professor of wildlife biology at West Virginia University, dismissed the notion that a flying monster was staking out the town, instead attributing the sightings to a sandhill crane, which stands almost as tall as the average adult man and has bright red flesh around its eyes. The explanation was compelling, especially given the number of early reports that had described the creature as bird-like. Some even hypothesized that the crane was perhaps deformed, especially if it made its home in the TNT area, what locals call a series of nearby bunkers that were used for manufacturing munitions during World War II. It has been suggested that bunkers have leaked toxic materials into the neighborhood wildlife preserve. Another Point Pleasant legend states that the creation of the Mothman was nothing more than the work of a very committed prankster who went so far as to hide in the abandoned World War II munitions plant. On December 15th, 1967, just over a year after the first Mothman sighting, traffic was especially bad. The Silver Bridge, built in 1928 to connect Point Pleasant, West Virginia, to Gallipolis, Ohio, was packed with cars from end to end. It had been built in a time when cars were lighter. The Model T weighed just about 1,500 pounds, a modest sum when compared to the 1967 average for a car, 4,000 pounds. The bridge's design featured very little redundancy, meaning that if one part failed, there was almost nothing in place to prevent other parts from falling as well. And on that December day, that's exactly what happened. Without warning, a single eye bar near the top of the bridge on the Ohio side cracked. The chain snapped and the bridge, its careful equilibrium disturbed, fell to pieces, plunging cars and pedestrians into the icy water of the Ohio River below. 46 died, drowned or crushed in the wreckage. It was the second terrible and bizarre thing to put the small community of Point Pleasant on the map in a year, and some connected the two. In 1975, Arthur John Neal conflated the Mothman sightings and the bridge disaster, as well as reported UFO activity, to create his book, The Mothman Prophecies. His story took hold, and the town became an icon among conspiracy theorists, UFOologists, and fans of the paranormal. The idea that visitations from the Mothman predicting disaster led some believers to make ties to the Chernobyl disaster of 1986, the Mexican swine flu outbreak of 2009, and the 2011 nuclear disaster in Fukushima, Japan. There have been other instances and sightings of the Mothman around the world just before disasters happen. Whether the Mothman is a mutation, a creature of the paranormal, an extraterrestrial entity, a large red-eyed bird, or just a mass hallucination, we may never know. But as for me, I'm keeping my eyes on the skies.